Welcome to another episode of Wild and Exposed podcast. Got a full crew tonight. Mike coming to us from Colorado, Jason in Utah, and I am in Wyoming. And this is a show that's 2 years in the making. But first of all, how you guys doing? Everybody faring well? We're getting ready to head south, so it's going to get cold, and then we can go warm up.
Head south. Oh, to Austin is what
To
you're talking
Austin,
about.
yeah, to Precision Camera.
Which will probably be done by the time this airs, but still, it'll be nice to go warm up a little and then.
Yeah, if it does, we were warm while the rest of
But
you were
here's
cold.
the deal. It's November 1st, and it was 70 degrees here today.
Yeah, I can't say that it feels like November, but
it's always 80 degrees here in South Carolina. So I don't know
and
what you're fussing about.
That is why this has been 2 years in the making. That's Doug Gardner
Yeah.
coming to us from South Carolina. And when we first started contemplating this conversation that we're going to have tonight, Doug and I were filming sheep in northwest Wyoming. And Doug had just finished previously that spring, just an epic sequence for a major TV show, America the Beautiful. It's out now, so we can talk about it, mention
That's
it by
right.
name, right?
You don't have to hide anymore.
So welcome, Doug. Welcome
Thank
back.
you. It's great
Yeah,
to be
he's
back.
still listed on the website as a guest host.
Yeah.
So he's never left.
Yeah, I never really
We always
left.
got him by the hook. We always got
He's-
a hook in him.
He's been MIA for a long time, and it's not that he's missing. He's just busy.
Very busy.
So you've been all over the place since, that's 2 years ago. So
Mhm.
just give us just some of the locations that you've been working in.
Yeah, it's been.
Oh, let me help you out with that.
Mhm.
The swamp.
Yeah,
You been in the swamp?
In the swamp, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. That's where I live, is the swamp. No, I get to venture out of the swamp every once in a while, but I will say it seems like the last 3 years has just been a blur, to say the least. Lots of different projects going on for different people. Been spending a lot of time in Louisiana for a variety of different shoots, bears and alligators and bobcats, different types of alligator behavior and bear behavior for different programs. Doing, I was telling y'all earlier, a piece on bighorn sheep that's coming up that's not finished yet. Bobcats in Florida, of all things. Waterfowl on the Atlantic Flyway, all up and down the Atlantic Flyway from the Eastern Shore down to Georgia. So yeah, it's just been wide open. Mike and I just finished the first part of a conservation piece up in as far north in Montana as you can go, actually. Basically on ungulates migrating out of the mountains, and down into the valleys and stuff. So yeah, it's kind of been a wild ride, just busier now than I ever have been. And I thought during the pandemic that it was going to be kind of interesting how any of us got work, but that's when it really exploded. Pretty much because people couldn't travel, and so yeah. So, a handful of us was kind of taking the whole workload for the entire industry.
You guys are going to hear a really cool story about that coming up, about the pandemic and how this whole shoot went down. But the cool thing about the swamps is it's amazing. It's you think of a swamp and you think of it's dark and dingy, and it's not that at all, right? I mean, we were asked to shoot some stuff that looks dark and dingy, and we're like, I don't think you can. This place is beautiful.
It's too beautiful. Yeah. I mean, the producer kept saying, what was the word that she kept using that we kept laughing about? Ominous. That's what she said. Because she said I was going to have a T-shirt made that says ominous. So every time you look at me, you know what I want. I want ominous. So we're spending hours in the swamp every day, and we're going in and out with boats through the cypress. You got Spanish moss hanging off of 1,000-year-old cypress trees, and you got resurrection fern, in full bloom all over the place. And birds everywhere. And like, how do you shoot something ugly and ominous? It's everything's beautiful. This is going to be tough. So, but no, they want everything scary, just like any film. They want the big scary wolf and the bear, the ferocious bear. That's the kind of things they want, right?
Snarling bear. Yeah.
Snarling bears, yeah. The swamp. That I'm actually working on a personal piece on swamps, on cypress swamps, and basically my mission is to change everybody's thoughts on what a swamp is all about. Everybody thinks this is dark, dangerous, malaria-ridden, and snake-infested, just horrible place, and it's totally opposite. I mean, yeah, there's dangers there. There are poisonous snakes, and there are alligators, but you know what? You can get hit by a drunk driver tonight, so you got a whole lot more chances to be injured by that than a poisonous snake in the swamp. So that's I'm kind of trying to actually show the beauty of the swamp and all of the different aspects of it's such a varied ecosystem. That's the other thing people don't really understand about swamps. So that's my goal. That's what we're working on.
It's impossible to make them look ugly. They're just amazing, especially when you have access on a boat and you can get in those way off areas and you think, oh man, it's going to be you. Who knows what you're going to run up against? But you get there and it's just beautiful, and you get a cool sunrise or a cool sunset, and then all of a sudden it's 3 times what it was when it was midday.
One of the most difficult things I run into is someone will say, especially in a swamp situation, especially they will go, okay, we want alligators fighting or bellowing or breeding or whatever. They're looking for a specific behavior. So when you're looking for a specific behavior, you're kind of laser focused on certain areas to be at a certain time, finding these alligators that you think you may have a good chance at capturing that behavior. So you're kind of really narrowing your vision, I guess you can say, to what you're looking for, and you're having the whole time you're looking for just these alligators fighting or whatever the behavior is. You're passing up all of this amazing stuff. I mean, just and that's where I get myself in trouble, because I'm like, I'll just stop and get a couple of these nice scenic shots, or some cool macro shots, kind of a slider move, and all these things. I was like, oh, this will look awesome with a drone. So I go up with the drone, and for long, I burned up the whole day, and I hadn't got a single thing that I really needed other than filler, really. And so yeah, it's hard to stay focused in a place as beautiful as a swamp. And anybody that thinks swamps are ugly, they really haven't experienced it. They're just kind of going by what the media has made them think.
We had big time problems in last time we were in Louisiana with whistling ducks, right?
Mm-hmm. A slight distraction.
Doug's a waterfowl, a certified waterfowl nut anyway.
Yeah.
So then you add whistling ducks in the swamp with pretty light and breeding activity, and he was lost for a couple of days.
Yeah.
A lot of whistling.
A lot of whistling, yeah. And I mean, they were just like on every tree, sitting on beautiful resurrection fern. They would just let the boat pass within feet of them. They were nesting in cavities eye level to us, and babies popping out of the trees. And I'm like, oh my God, please cancel this shoot so I can go shoot this. I'm going to stay a few weeks.
That's what I was going to say. It's easy to get distracted by the biodiversity in the sagebrush grasslands, and
Yeah.
it's probably 1/100th of the biodiversity that's available in a swamp. So I can't imagine that the ADHD wouldn't run rampant for a wildlife guy.
For sure.
I think you could spend a lifetime in the swamps. I mean, Doug doesn't do that because he gets to Alaska or South America or whatever, but you could just be the swamp guy if you wanted to.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And it seems like, I mean, you've seen this as well. When you do one film on something, as soon as that airs, all of a sudden, it's like for the next 2-3 years, and it seems to be a 2 or 3 year pattern. It's just like that's all they want. It's like you get different producers from different production companies calling you up saying, I saw you do this and I saw you do that. And, we want to do the same thing, but we want to, do a different twist, or we have a little slightly different storyline that we want to follow. And that's what happens. And it just keeps going for me as far as swamp stuff, because, more swamp stuff I do, the more I get. It's nice to get breaks to do stuff like the bighorn sheep. And, I just got done with a moose rut in Wyoming. And so it's really nice. I did a big thing on whitetail deer in the Appalachians, which was a great break. I love whitetail deer. I love any ungulates, any of the ungulates.
Hold up. You were just here for the moose rut?
Not this year, last year.
Oh, okay. You're lucky.
Just about got in trouble, Doug.
We're about to have a whole different conversation. So, Doug, obviously, you're a fun guy to talk to. You just kind of let you roll because you get so much time out in the field. But the big reason we want to talk to you tonight is about the sequence that you filmed the spring of the pandemic. And just to back up to what Mike was talking about, this sequence came about because you kind of got stuck in one location, and only because you were already there, because they weren't going to let you travel, right?
That's correct. Yeah, the kind of we'll back up a little bit. The initial shoot was to try to capture the behavior of Louisiana black bears emerging from their dens with their newborn cubs. Now, that doesn't sound like an interesting behavior, because we've all seen documentaries of bears emerging from dens. No big deal. The thing about the Louisiana black bear is they obviously live in the Louisiana swamps. The only place for them to den are in these 1,000 to 2,000 year old cypress trees that have cavities in them. So what they do is they actually go up into these, they find a cavity that's big enough for them to get into. And it's usually where lightning has struck a cypress tree, and it has burned out the center, but the tree is actually still alive. It creates these huge cavities down in the bottom. So they'll crawl up in them and go down to the very bottom of the base of the tree. But biologists don't know. None of them have ever seen it. It's never been filmed. They don't have any data on it, because there's no way for them to really record this. It takes so much time to get. They don't know how the mama bears actually get the cubs from the tree to dry ground, because what happens is in early December, the swamp in the bayous of Louisiana, it will be mostly dry. So it'll be maybe a little bit of water, maybe a couple inches, or maybe just a little bit of damp mud. But for all intents and purposes, it's going to be dry. And so when she goes up early December and climbs into that tree to hibernate, she's there for the remainder of the winter and into the spring. Well, throughout the winter and into the early spring, the water level in the swamp continues to get deeper and deeper and deeper. And so when it's time for them to emerge from the tree, by that time the Mississippi River is starting to flood outside its banks, which it does every year about the same time, and it's from snow melt out of the Rockies and other watersheds up in the northern part of the country, all come down the river and make the river swell. The river swells way outside of its banks, and so when she comes out of the tree with her two or three new babies, she's got 5 or 6 feet of water under the tree now. The land in Louisiana is so flat and low that 1 inch of water may cover a quarter of a mile of ground. So as you get another 2 inches, dry ground is now almost 3/4 of a mile away. And so you see how it rapidly eats up dry ground real quick. So 5 to 6 feet of water means dry ground might be 2 miles away or more. How does mama get these cubs from the tree to dry ground? Are they born knowing how to swim and they just swim there themselves? B, do they climb on mama's back and she just kind of ferries them across? Or C, does mama carry them like a cat does a kitten? You know how a cat will grab the kittens by the back of the neck and just carry them around? Does she do that? What's the answer? Nobody knew. And so that's what this film was supposed to answer. And we did. We answered it. Let me back up a little bit. So the crazy thing about this, the way this whole thing went down was we had started talking about this shoot the fall prior to the fall of 2019. And we were getting all of the, all the logistics worked out, where to stay, how long we needed to be there, equipment, all the logistics that go along with it, food, location. When we've been working with the state biologist in Louisiana, the bear biologist, Maria Davis, we contacted her and told her what we wanted to do. And she said, yeah, I think I can help you. And what they do is she goes out and collars bears in the Tensas Basin. The Tensas Basin of Louisiana, that is the highest concentration of black bears anywhere in Louisiana. And it's in the Tensas Basin is actually it's actually a fairly small area. When you talk about the size of Louisiana and all the swamps that are available, but there's a real high concentration there. So she said, I have a project area where I have a lot of bears and I have a lot of collars out. And so over the past 25 years, she's been recording data about how her collars move throughout these swamps. And so what she does in the fall, she starts watching them, and she'll go on the computer and she can track exactly where these collars go and how long amount of time that they spend in one location, their routes, food areas that they go through. And then when she sees the collar stop for a long period of time, like 24 hours or longer, she knows that bear is either died or it has gone into hibernation. And what she told me, listen, in December, she said, I have a bear that has gone into hibernation and it's on private property in the Tensas Basin. I think it's a 30,000 acre private tract of land. And it was all like cypress swamps and owned by a guy in Louisiana. She said, I've gone to this tree before. It's a beautiful cypress tree. It's a very filmable situation. You got to imagine, most swamps, you have a lot of clutter, a lot of brush in the way and vines and stuff. And so you have to find those clear areas to film in. And this particular tree was just like made for filming. I mean, it was a big, very old tree, a very pretty cypress tree. Didn't have so much brush around it that you couldn't film, without maybe doing a little bit of pruning around it. So she said, I've got a bear that's gone into hibernation in this tree. Now, this is early December, and that's generally when they go into hibernation. She said, why don't you come to Louisiana and take a look at the situation? The bears will be, in the den, and let us know if this is what you want to do. So we did a recce trip to go and check everything out. We got there, and she told me, she said, I'm going to do I will do a den inspection now, and then again in early February, I will do another den inspection. And this is normal for all of my project areas. When I find a bear a collared bear that is, gone into hibernation, I will do 2 den inspections. So she said, I will do one today, and we'll just check, make sure she's healthy and everything's good, and I'll know exactly what her state is. So Maria climbs up in this tree and down head first in there with this bear. No bear spray, no gun, no nothing. And she comes out and she said, she's good. I know this bear. She had cubs 2 years ago, so that means she is due to have cubs again this year. And she said, and I think that she is actually pregnant. I said, okay. She said, you need to go ahead and do what you need to do. If you need to do a little bit of clearing now, if you need to set up a blind, all that. So we did. We cleared some bushes. We set up 2 blinds actually. One on one side of the tree and one at 45 degrees on the other side of the tree. That way, when I came back to actually film, depending on what the wind situation is, because wind means everything to a bear. That's how they read the world. Their smell is incredible. Depending on what the wind was doing in the morning when I went out, I had some options about which blind I wanted to get into. So we built 2 blinds, and got everything ready to go, and we left. And the deal, when I put trail cameras up, cellular trail cameras, watching the hole. The way this thing works is, she said, generally, based on my records, the earliest emerging dates for bears in our studies over the past 25 years has been, I think she said, April, like the second week in April was the earliest, and the latest was the end of April. Y'all need to, I would get here about a week before the earliest ones on record, and that way you don't miss anything, and it's just a matter of sitting and waiting. So January, we planned to do this, and of course COVID had started ramping up, and it was the big, all the talk, and it started kind of going crazy about January, right? And that's when everybody was freaking out. What we had done was, they went ahead and paid. We had a lady across the street from the cabin that I was going to stay in. The landowner let us stay in his hunting lodge on the property, and it was supposed to be me and 5 other people from the UK. Producer, assistant producer, 2 other camera guys, and I think an assistant. They were going to be there. What we did is we went ahead and purchased all of the food that we would need and had it delivered to the cabin, and we weren't going to leave the property at all. And then we were going to hire the lady that kind of maintains the lodge and stuff throughout the year for the hunters. We were going to hire her to actually do all the cooking for us, so we could come in the evenings, and the food would be ready, and let her handle all that. So what they did, because of COVID, they actually paid for her to go into quarantine for 2 weeks prior to us getting there. That way there was no chance of her being infected with COVID, whatever. So all of these logistical things had been set up and ready. We had the food, we had the place, we had cook, everything stuff we needed had already been delivered to the lodge. And I was supposed to leave on March, I think it was the 15th of March, and start driving out to Louisiana. So I always travel. Doesn't matter whether the production has their own kit. I always travel with all my personal stuff anyway, because Mike, as well as I do, you get there, and how much personal stuff do we always have to end up using because they didn't bring everything or something breaks. So I travel with all my complete kit all the time. So I get to about Atlanta. I think it was just past Atlanta, Georgia, and the phone rings. And they said, the shoot is off. This was the producer. And then they said, the shoot is off. I said, what do you mean the shoot is off? And she said, well, you haven't heard? I said, no, I've been driving all day. Said, well, there's been a travel ban put in place, and we can't leave the UK. And so the 5 of us can't get there. The shoot is off. Also, all of the production houses were being shut down. Initially it was like 2 weeks, and then they were going to reassess. And then if everything needed to go and shut down longer, they would do that. But the initial shutdown was 2 weeks, and said everything shut down. We're taking this whole thing off the books. And I said, let me make sure I understand exactly what you're saying. I said, y'all are not postponing this shoot. Y'all are actually axing the whole thing. And she said, yes, because we don't know the uncertainties of how long this is going to last. And we just don't know what's going on. And so, yeah, it's a done deal. I said, okay, I'm on my way to Louisiana then. I'm going to film a bear. I know there's a bear in a tree with cubs. All the food's been paid for. It's going to go waste. Everything is there and in place, and I've got my equipment. And I'm going to film a bear coming out of a tree with cubs. And I'll let you know how it goes. And, in my mind, I'm thinking, if I get this, we're going to talk.
Right, exactly. So, Doug, what time of year was that? I mean, what was roughly the date? I know you probably can't remember the exact date, but
I think it was either 15th or 17th of March,
okay, because
2020.
that's gonna be important here soon when we get to the end of this story.
I think it was the 15th or the 17th of March. It was whenever that first day they put the travel ban in place. So anyway, I continued. I said, okay. They said, you can't do that. I said, what do you mean I can't do that? I said, I've got my own equipment and y'all aren't going to do it. And everything has been done. And the landowner said I can be there. So I'm going to Louisiana. And they said, well, you got to understand, you have there's no resources in case you get in trouble. If you get injured or whatever, there's nobody to help you. And our offices are closed and, you're not on contract anymore. And I said, I'm a freelance guy. This is the story of my life. We always assume our own risk anyway. Every day that we go out, I said, so nothing's different. I said, I understand, what you're saying, and they said, well, be careful. So off to Louisiana I went, and after about the third day, I was sitting in the blind. I get a phone call. Actually, I get a text, and they said, call us immediately. I was in a blind, so I couldn't call until late that night when I got back. And they said, don't know what's going on, but right now we are actually all the production companies, all the networks. I mean, in the natural history industry right now, there is 450 to 500 crew members spread out all over the world for 30 to 50 different productions, and everybody is scrambling to try to get all these crew members back to their home countries while they still can. All the contracts have been canceled for some reason. You are the only one that has been allowed to stay on contract. Said you are back on contract. So I was the only person at that moment that was actually working under contract for this production, and it was crazy because that's when all of the things that you normally do leading up to a shoot, risk assessment, and all these kind of things. You got people. Usually, you got people there to help you if you need assistance. I didn't have any of that. Nothing. I was other than the cook. I was the only person on a 30,000 acre tract of land, a swamp. I was having to do this all by myself.
And you got to know, like with the BBC, when we go out on these shoots, they are very in tune with what's going on. Like we have to call every night when we get back. We'll call or text or something because they want to know that their people are safe. Whether you're doing bears or alligators or swamps and snakes, whatever. They just want to know that you're back and safe and ready to go out the next day.
Yeah, they are super. All of the production companies are very, very safety conscious.
Yeah, I've only been on one of those, and when I go. I mean, it's nothing for nobody to hear from me for 8-10 days, and they're anal about making sure you're checking in all the time. And I don't think they understand completely that there are places where you can't.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and the other thing too, you got to understand they have insurance underwriters
Exactly.
that are
Yeah.
breathing down their neck, so
Sure.
they have to be crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's for sure.
Absolutely.
But yeah,
I
so
would, I would though, Doug, like to have been a fly on the wall on the Zoom meeting that led up to you getting called in the blind. And I think they probably started doing some calculating and thought this is going to be a lot cheaper if we just let him stay where he's
well,
at,
I
and it's going
think
to be if he gets what he's after.
well that makes a much better story, doesn't it? But I think actually what was happening is they said, you know what? Maria, the biologist, she called us, and I forgot to tell you this. So in February, the beginning of February, she went out to do her den inspections again, and she crawled up in there and actually confirmed that the bear had cubs and that the cubs were safe and healthy and everything, and Mama was too, and that they were still there, and you should just stick with the plan and they will emerge at some point. The story about, you're saying why I went back on contract. I think what it was, to be honest with you, is they felt like, so the cook is the only person of the public that I would be in contact with. And she had been paid to stay in quarantine for 2 weeks. So we knew she was completely safe and I was completely safe. So I'm not going to see anybody I'm not going to cross paths with anybody because I'm living in the swamp. It's not like I was leaving and going to a hotel. The lodge is in the middle. It's in the middle of this piece of property. So I literally get on a 4-wheeler every morning and drive into the swamp and then walk. And then I do the same thing every night coming out. So they probably felt like I was the safest person on the earth at that point. You know, I wasn't going to get infected, and I wasn't going to, transmit it to anybody else. So that's probably the reason.
Plus, all your food was there. All the logistics had been done way
Yeah,
ahead of schedule, right?
paid
So
for,
you were,
done.
it's all there and paid for.
I started sitting, and come to find out, I did have, even though they were closed, officially closed, and this production started out as a Nat Geo production. By the end of the shoot, it actually became a Disney production, which was really weird. They were in the middle of actually acquiring Nat Geo at the time, and which was really weird because like you sign a contract at the beginning for Nat Geo, and at the end your paycheck comes from Disney. You're like, what? But anyway, even though offices were closed, the producer, who still to this day, she is by far the best producer I've ever worked for. She's just a wonderful lady. Her name is Jo Harvey. If you ever get a chance to work with her, she's freaking amazing. She genuinely cared about you, your health, overall how you were doing, the production, everything. She was just always, she was watching the radar, weather radar constantly, and she would be texting me like, hey, looks like you got an hour, and you might have to get out of there. And so it was just a constant communication, which helps when you have nothing else to do in a blind for 14 hours a day. So, but yeah, 14 hours a day was kind of the deal. So I would get up in the morning and I would be in the blind an hour before the sun rose, and then I could not leave the blind for any reason unless my life was in danger until an hour after the sun set. Basically pitch black dark to pitch black dark. And the reason for that was I'd gone all this effort to be sure that they couldn't smell me, which you're not going to, just so you know, you're not going to hide from a bear's nose. That is impossible. You can take steps to not be quite as offensive as far as smell, or to startle them, to a certain degree. But you're not going to hide. You don't hide from a bear. It's just, it's impossible. But the other thing was I definitely didn't want her to catch me going in and out from the blind. Basically, the blind looked like a giant brush pile. So it was these little cheap Walmart pop-up hunting blinds, 4 feet by 4 feet by 50 inches tall. That's what I was sitting in the water. I had those covered with brush. The closer she gets to actually emerging from the den, she will actually start sticking her head out of the den and looking around. It's not really it's not a hibernation. It's just more of a what's the term? Y'all help me. Torpor, yeah. And so it's just a very lethargic state. She's fully awake, eyes open, and she would start coming out a couple of weeks prior to emergence. She would actually stick her head out. Sometimes she would climb completely out the hole, crawl down the side of the tree, just hold on to the tree and lean over and drink, and then go back into the hole. I didn't want her to bust me, basically walking in. If she caught me wading through the water, and she would go, wait a minute, there's something strange about that big brush pile right there. And so if she ever caught me doing that, moving in and out, then when she went to emerge, she may take the cubs around to the backside of the tree where I can't see anything and leave from that direction. Or she could move them to a whole nother location in the middle of the night, which they do. And I found that out actually the next year, that they actually will move them completely in the middle of the night sometimes. Here I am starting out in the dark. Basically would leave the cabin early in the morning on the 4-wheeler, drive about 8 minutes. And then I would park the 4-wheeler about 500 yards down a levee so that she really wouldn't hear the 4-wheeler and wouldn't, they try to, again, keep the smell of the exhaust down, that kind of thing. And I would leave that. And then in one trip, I would have to carry everything with me in a set of waders, big lens, rig camera, enough brick batteries to last 14 hours. So that's basically 14 batteries, and they're not light. All my food and water for the day, anything else I may need, tripod, everything. And all of that's got to go in one trip.
Books and movies and DVD players too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, got to have all the books and all that kind of thing. Cheez-Its, a lot of Cheez-Its. I lived on Cheez-Its. Yeah, and so I'd walk down the levee, and I would get to a point where I actually would have to step off the levee and start wading through the water. Now, this is the part that actually created a lot of problems for me. It's pitch black dark, and it's full of alligators and water moccasins. What I would do, it was so dark that I couldn't use a headlamp because, again, if she sticks her head out, and it's so dark that I can't see if her head's poked out of the hole. If she may be standing there watching me the whole time, I don't know that. So I didn't want to have a headlamp on. So what I would do is I would actually step down to the water, and I would put my face down as close to the water as I could, so I could actually see the reflection of the sky and where the kind of the outline of the tops of the canopy of the trees in the swamp. I could see that line, and I could actually see the surface of the water. So if there was anything like a snake moving through the water or an alligator's head, I could actually see a profile, dark profile against the surface of the water. And so I would kind of check a 5-foot area, and I would just move real slow through the water. And I put my face down low to the water again and check it again. And so it would take me about 20 minutes each morning to go 75 yards. And the blind was about 75 yards from the levee. I mean, and you don't realize until you're in a situation like this where everything is just perfectly still, you don't realize how much noise you actually make. The smallest little things. I'm moving just an inch at a time through the water with waders on, and every little ripple sounds like a tidal wave out there. And so I'm just trying to be as quiet as I can. You get in the blind, and then you start sitting. And you're sitting all day long. You, like I said, the only thing that I could come out for was if my life was in danger for some reason. So lightning, or another animal or something like that. So I was having a medical emergency. That's the only reason I could leave.
So hold on, before you go too much further, there's a couple of things. So you said earlier the blind was what, 44 by 44 by 50 inches tall.
Yes.
Well, I don't know if anybody's been next to Doug, but he's, I don't know, what are you, like 6'1" or something?
6'2".
6'2". So he's a tall dude, right? So can you imagine sitting in this blind for 14 hours and you can't stand up because it's only 50 inches tall? And then also, didn't you, I remember you saying that you had like a little floaty kind of thing that you could put your gear on so that when you are making your way through the swamp.
I use, anytime I work in the swamp, I use, it's a decoy sled is what it is. It's basically a little plastic, it's not even a boat, it's a tub. It's about 48 inches long, and it's about 28 inches wide, and it's about 12 inches deep, and it's just thick rubber. Plastic is all it is. And hunters will pile it full of decoys, and that way they can walk and drag it through the swamp. I can throw all of my equipment, everything, CN20, red, everything in that, and it floats it, with plenty of freeboard. And that way, and I just hold on to a rope as I'm walking through the swamp, and I do it all the time, no matter what the situation is. And that way, if I fall in a hole or trip over a stick, I just let go of the sled, and it just floats around fine, unaffected. I'm the only thing that gets wet. And so that's the way I would haul my equipment in every morning and out every night, is with that decoy sled.
I just wanted to give everybody that picture because it's almost like Navy SEAL. But can you imagine being a Navy SEAL trying to hold your backpack above your head so your camera doesn't get wet? But you didn't have to do that. You
No,
had
thank
that
God I didn't have to do
decoy
that.
sled, but you still had to like travel at an inch per minute or inch.
Yeah, it takes a long time, and you just kind of want to hurry up and get there, and you're like, no, you got to slow down. You got to slow down. You got to slow down. So it was always this, everything you did was this conscious effort. You're having to think about so many things. The whole thing was just an emotional roller coaster. Just physical and mental. I'll tell you about, so every night when I would get in, again, I don't have a crew now because the crew is stuck in the UK. I don't have anybody doing DIT. I don't have anybody handling, any assistance whatsoever. And so get home at night after dark, I've got to rush and eat supper, get a shower, charge batteries, download all the footage and back it up 3 times. Do all this stuff, have everything prepared for the next morning, ready to go, and then get up at 4 o'clock and do all this over again. I would just find myself rushing, just scarfing food down as fast as I could, just so I could get that extra 15 minutes, to sleep. And I would lay down the bed, and you like everything else, you have to kind of decompress for about 5 minutes before you actually start to relax, in the bed. And I started going through this thing every night, and it started really mentally messing with me. And I grew up and born and raised, still work in the swamps, a lot. So snakes and alligators I respect them, but I'm not really scared of them. But I started getting to this point where at night when I'd lay down in the bed, I would just constantly try to figure out in my brain, okay, what are you going to do if if an alligator does grab you in the dark, heading out tomorrow morning or coming out tomorrow night, how are you going to handle this? What is going to be your protocol? And, are you going to go for the eyes, or, what are you going to do? And if he grabs your arm, what are you going to do? If he grabs your leg, what are you going to do? I mean, all these scenarios go through your head. And then as you're looking at it, thinking about it, you see, teeth and mouth and water splashing. All these scary things go through your mind. Same with, if I get bit by a water moccasin, what am I going to do? I never could. Every time I closed my eyes, these scenarios would go through my mind, and this was happening every night. So I'm sitting here trying to decompress and relax and get to sleep as quick as possible, but I can't. And I actually kind of developed a phobia because doing this every night for 42 nights, the same thoughts. And so, yeah, it really kind of freaked me out. The whole thing messed with my head really bad. Really bad.
That was the first time you alluded to how many days you were out there.
Yes.
And what I was going to ask is, so they make a plan for your physical health, and obviously there were some concerns there because nobody really knew what to expect with the pandemic and that kind of thing. But also your emergency plan should something happen. But they don't really have a plan for mental health, and you're out there by yourself. So you got that TV show Alone. Those guys, if they make it for 100 days, they call it now. So you were about halfway there.
I was halfway there.
Plus, you had all these other responsibilities. This is kind of personal. This is kind of personal, but so intermittently, you were kind of keeping in touch with the world through Facebook. You couldn't tell anybody where you were at or allude to where you were at. But then I would send you a text every once in a while, just say hello, and you could tell at about the 30-day point, your responses started getting a lot shorter. So you were definitely feeling it.
Oh, I was feeling it for sure. It was, like I said, it was an emotional nightmare is what it was. It really was. So it got to the point where, so the first 22 days, I didn't see the bear at all, but I could start hearing faint little whimpers of the cubs. So I said, okay, I know they're in there. And then it started getting to the point, and that, like you said, I started kind of doing a little daily, I don't know, just a little vlog thing, just recording, what was going on that day. And you could definitely see, I think it was, like you said, around day 27 to 30, you could see it was taking a toll on me. You could tell I was severely sleep deprived. You could see it in my eyes for sure. And that was one of my biggest fears, was actually falling asleep, because I didn't know, no one knew, how long, this event takes place. Is this something that happens in a few minutes? Is it something over 20 minutes or an hour or 2 hours or overnight or what? Excuse me. As a matter of fact, I texted Maria one day and I said, so what should I expect? How long does this take? This all day event or what? She said, she simply texted back, at this point, you know more than we do. And I was like, okay. So I was so
So
scared.
there's that.
Yeah, there's that.
So,
So I
so we
was
got that going
so
for us.
scared that I would actually fall asleep just for a little quick 5 minute, cat nap. I was scared I'd miss the event. And at that point, you would not know, was there anything still in the tree? Are they still there? Am I sitting here for days watching an empty tree, or are they still in there? That messed with me. It's hard to stay awake for 14 hours when you're running on nothing and you're just mentally exhausted anyway. So doing this day after day, and I got to day 37. It was all I could do just to record that one little 45-second video. It's all I could do to stay awake, just to mutter out a few words, and you can definitely tell it. It got to day 42. Like I said, the only thing that I could leave for was if I was in danger or like a severe lightning storm, and we had been having lots of storms on Easter Sunday. There was a huge tornado outbreak all over, and it was kind of a squall line that went up through Louisiana and through Mississippi. It was an outbreak of tornadoes all over both states. I was caught up in the middle of it, and we had two tornadoes come. Well, one came right through the property, so within a couple miles of my location. One across the street in another farmer's field came through there, and then there were several within 5 or 6 miles. I stuck it out. I mean, I was just trusting that radar. That I lived by that radar. I would kind of play the radar forward and kind of backwards and kind of calculate how many minutes it takes me to walk out, how many minutes it takes me to get my bags packed, how many minutes it takes to drive the four-wheeler back to the house, all of those things. And so I had it kind of down to the point where, I figured it take me 37 to 40 minutes from the time I want to start getting out the blind to the time I can get, into the four-wheeler. We've been having all these storms. On day 42, it got real. Joe is texting me, you have to leave now. And I'm looking at it, on the radar, and I'm going, I've got about an hour and 15 minutes I can still sit, and then I have to leave. So I'm watching the radar and nothing's happening. It's getting windy and lightning is starting to pop all around me. It had sprinkled a little bit of rain, and then the rain came down real heavy, but then the rain quit. All of a sudden, it just got kind of quiet, but except for the lightning, and lightning was popping everywhere. And I'm like, okay, I got to go. I cannot. It's popping close enough that I can feel it. I'm at the base of a cypress tree. Matter of fact, one of the tallest ones in there. I actually started zipping up the bag and putting everything away. And the last thing I ever do is actually put the camera away, turn the camera off and put that away. Everything else, getting your lunch packed away and dead batteries put in the bag, and, just any little extra things, getting everything but the camera. Last thing is I peek out the blind one last time just to make sure there's nothing there. And the hole is full of black fur. And I'm like, crap. Because she would come out. It was at that point for about 2 weeks leading up to that. She would actually come out and just hang out go to sleep. She'd stick her head out of the hole and put her paws on the edge of the hole and just go to sleep for about 20 minutes. And then she'd crawl back in, or she'd climb down and get a drink and go back up. And I'm like, no, you can't do this now. It's not time for a nap. I got to get out of here. And also, one thing that's important to say is that when she would come out and just kind of take a nap and she goes back in, you wouldn't see her the rest of the day at that point. I mean, you just wouldn't see her. So I'm like, no, baby, you got to get back in that hole. I said, because I got to get out of here. And lightning popped one time and she kind of flinched and she dove back into the hole. I was like, good. Took the camera off the tripod and something to have me to look back through the hole one more time. She's out of the hole coming down the tree. And I'm like, whoa. So I put the camera back quickly, put it back on the tripod. Now the camera was still running, but it was off the tripod. I lock it back on, get back on her. She goes to the water and starts to swim out a little ways. and leaving the tree. I said, "Oh no, this is it. This is different. She hasn't ever left the tree before." And so I start filming it. She goes all the way across in front of me, goes to dry ground, and spends about, by herself, spends about 5 minutes. I don't see her. And then all of a sudden I see her coming back. So I'm filming her coming, swimming back to the tree. She gets to the tree. She scampers up the tree. She grabs by the time she gets back, the cubs are screaming their heads off. They think mama's left, and they're all looking out of the hole. She goes up the tree. She grabs one of them by the head, pulls it off the tree, and starts down the tree, gets in the water with it, swims all the way to the bank with it. And she gets about, you might as well call, she's on dry ground. I mean, her feet were still in the water, but she was there. She was not but 2 or 3 feet, and she would have been on green grass. And lightning popped, and I saw her throw her head up with the cub still in her mouth, and she hightailed it, swam the cub all the way back to the tree, went up in the tree, licked it dry, came down, did it again, swam all the way across with the cub, same cub, and this time she took it all the way to the bank. She came back by herself. Now you got cubs in the tree screaming their brains out, and there's one on the bank screaming her brain out, and lightning is popping everywhere at this point. I mean, you ever been in these electrical storms where you could feel like the air was sizzling? There's so much electricity and just atmospheric unstableness that, I mean, it's just sizzling around you. That's what it was like. You knew you were going to get struck any second.
Doug, real quick, that's not a really good time to be holding on to a big metal camera on a big metal tripod.
It's not.
By the way. Just
in the tallest tree in the swamp.
The tallest tree in the swamp. So she swims back across. She grabs the second cub and starts doing the same thing. And by the way, the answer to the question about how they do it. So she actually takes the whole cub's head and puts her whole mouth over it. So when she gets in the water, the cub is actually breathing air in her mouth. So she completely gets her mouth around it and gets down in the water and goes with it. It's really, really crazy. So she gets the second cub and gets halfway across with it. Lightning pops. She turns around, makes it. I mean, the look on her face is like, I am completely distressed at this point. You could see it when you see the footage. You'll remember to look at the mama bear's face. You can see it on her face. She doesn't know what to do. The storm's freaking her out. She's already under stress about having to cross through all the alligators. That's a huge threat to her, and not to mention just the stress of moving these cubs. So she gets second cub, lightning pops. She takes it back to the tree, climbs up, licks it dry, comes down, tries it again. She does this 9 times with the second cub. She'll go halfway across, turn around, come back. Halfway across, turn around, come back. But she made 9 attempts before she finally took that second cub all the way to the bank. And then, I watched them kind of walk off into the sunset. Well, not really a sunset, but a lightning storm. So yeah, 42 days is what it took.
So there's a couple more things to unpack there, because I remember talking to you either via text or maybe we just talked. I don't remember, but weren't there a couple of nights where there were alligators roaring behind you and you were watching snakes swim across? I mean, that totally is why you go to bed with that whole tense.
Yeah. It really got to the point it freaked me out a lot. But yeah, so you would, sitting in the blind during the day, I would have snakes, water moccasins and water snakes. Both of those, they would swim past the blind and come right up, and crawl through the bushes that I had piled up on the blind, crawl through them, and come in under the edge of the blind and swim around your ankles and go out, the door. Alligators. And the males would actually sit there and bellow at each other between the blind and the dry ground, the route that I wade through every morning, every night. They would sit there and face off each other. Then one morning I had, for some reason, the boars were they're actually out roaming around. They either don't hibernate quite as intensively as the females do, or they come out earlier or whatever. But I saw a lot of male bears walking the levee and swimming through the swamp and that kind of thing. I'm sitting there one day and I see a black bear coming down the levee, and it comes right down I took the same path every morning. So I'd walk the levee and I cut down through the bushes and the briars to the edge of the water. And so I did that intentionally to kind of to wear a nice path down so I could see my feet every morning walking through the snakes. And you'd see him coming down the levee, and then he'd walk straight down my path to the water, and he's looking across the water at me. I'm going, I know, I've been around black bears enough to know what's getting ready to happen. He is curious. He smells me. He's curious, and he wants to know what the heck that big brush pile is all about. He's coming out here. And sure enough, I didn't even get the thought through my mind. Here he comes. He swam out to the blind. He's trying to get up on the platform that I have the blind strapped to. And I'll come back to the platform. But he's trying to climb. He's not trying to do me any harm. He doesn't even know I'm in there. He's just curious. But he's about to turn the whole blind over and dump me, upside down in the swamp, just trying to be curious. And so I had bear spray with me, but I definitely didn't want to spray that. She'd smell that. I didn't want to do that unless it was absolutely necessary. And I didn't want to make a bunch of racket and scare him off that would also scare my mama bear in the tree. He's 18 inches from my face on the other side of the blind. And I just leaned up to the window and I said, real quiet, I said, "Hey, bear." He didn't do anything. And I said, "Hey, bear," a little bit louder. And he almost broke a leg trying to get away from me. He took off through that water. He didn't know whether he wanted to hop to the water or swim or pull a Jesus and walk on water, but he knew he didn't want nothing to do with that talking brush pile. So anyway, so yeah, things like that happen all the time. I mean, I had otters that would come out and try to get up in the brush pile around the blind. But so yeah, it was the snakes and alligators were definitely there, and you'd see them feet from the blind every day, back and forth. And that just kind of wears on you, like, okay, 12 hours from now, I'm going to be walking that in the dark. Where are these alligators going to be? And like I said, I would play it through my mind, at night. How am I going to deal with this? I had a lot of good plans. I'm glad I didn't have to use any of them.
No kidding.
Back to the platform. So I didn't remember I told you that the swamp kind of starts off dry in early December, and then as the Mississippi floods, the swamps start to fill up and gets really deep. It was probably, I'm gonna guess it was halfway through the shoot. It rained a lot one night, and I said, okay, it's probably rained 3 inches, and okay, with some runoff, I'm gonna be prepared for 5 inches of water tomorrow morning. So it's probably gonna be water up to my knees, which would mean I'm sitting in a camp chair, just one of those folding camp chairs on the ground. So that means basically, water is gonna be at my knees and covering the bottom of the chair, like my butt would be wet. But I was in waders. I got there, and that wasn't the case at all. Though water came up about 18 inches. The waders did me no good that day, because when I sat in the chair, the water was well over my waders. It was up to my under my armpits, and so I sat there all day with the water this close to my face. Had the camera up as high as it would go because I couldn't stand up. You can't stand up in the blind. It's only 54 inches tall. All night I'm trying to figure out, all day I'm trying to figure out, okay, how are you going to deal with this problem if the water keeps on coming up? And it was scheduled to come up more. In the middle of the night, I was able to go, this property has a lot of farming activities going on. They manage a lot of the property for duck impoundments. So there's tractors and there's a maintenance shop and that kind of stuff. So there's tools available to me. So I went in the shop one night and I spent several hours and I built a metal platform out of scrap aluminum that I could hang. It was basically like a lock-on deer stand, if you know what those are. And half of your viewers will know it, half of them won't know. But it's basically a metal platform that leverages itself against the base of a tree. So the more weight you put on it, it locks itself to the tree. So I basically built a big one of those, one that was 4.5 feet by 4.5 feet wide, that I could hook around the base of a cypress tree. So now my challenge is I'm by myself. I've got to get this platform down there and in the water and hooked to a tree silently by myself and in the dark the next morning. And I was able to do it. It took forever. Sun was well up by the time I ever got into the blind because it took way longer than I thought. It wasn't perfect. I had to figure things out. Anyway, so this platform, what this allowed me to do is as the water level rose, I could move that platform up or down as the water level would go up and down. And that way, I wasn't going to need a snorkel at some point to film this behavior. Easter Sunday, with all the string of storms, the tornadoes and everything, it dropped 9 inches in 24 hours. I came in the next day and everything is covered in water. The blind, everything's covered in water. So we had a total of about 6 feet of water under that tree. And so, so it got to the point now you're having more problems. Everything was a problem. Every day that went by, it's like usually you figure out how to solve problems to make the rest of your shoot easier and more time efficient and blah, blah, blah. Every problem that I solved, it's like it created more problems. Every day there's more problems. So now I've got this platform that I can compensate for the height of the water. Sounds like great, right? Well, when the water got to 6 feet deep, I'm 6'2". So that means the platform is about where my nose or my eyes are, the base of it. How do I get into this platform now? How do I get up and in there? So back to the shop, I'm actually having to find things that I can put that will stay sunk in the water, that I can step up onto, which was not easy. I mean, I was trying to find milk crates or whatever. That didn't work. They broke. So it was just problem after problem after problem. Every morning you just knew something else was, you were going to have to deal with something else. So anyway, but we got it done. It was the toughest assignment I've ever done by far, by a long shot, but it was absolutely the most rewarding I've ever done too, by a long shot.
I couldn't wait to see the footage, and there's one thing I want to bring up about it. But when it finally came out, Doug, I gotta say, it's like a wedding photographer. You got one shot to get it right, and when it happened, man, you did a spectacular job. That was incredible.
Well, thank you,
Just
thank you.
the footage that you were able to get, and the one thing I wanted to mention before Mike comments is I don't know how deep you want to get into this, but you were dealing with a radio collared bear.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
in the final product, that
There's
bear
no
didn't
collar.
have a radio collar on it.
Right.
So if you
we can
wouldn't
talk about
mind,
that.
just touch a little bit on that.
A lot of productions have different guidelines for filming. With all of the natural history productions now, they try to do it as ethically as they can, no baiting and, that kind of stuff, which is great. But there are things that you're trying to film now that there's no way to do it unless there's some type of influence by man. And so it wasn't like we radio collared these bears. The scientists were already, biologists, they were already had these collars radio collared so they could learn their behaviors and try to learn what they could do to help them. And that's just one of the things is that, there was a collar on it, and that's the only way we knew where that bear was and how many cubs it had. And that was really the only way to do it. But they didn't want. Obviously, it's very it's an ugly thing to see a collar on an animal or ear tag or that kind of thing. And they actually allotted $32,000 extra in the editing budget just to remove the collar. And those kind of things, I don't have a problem with that because it's not like we added something to the scene that wasn't there. It wasn't like we changed the behavior of the animal. We didn't do any of that. The only thing we did was take off something that was ugly off of something that was already natural. We shot the natural bear in a natural setting, doing a natural behavior. We just removed something that shouldn't have been there to begin with, is the way I look at it. So yeah, so the collar was removed via, and they did a hell of a job. I'm gonna tell you, you can't tell.
I was going to say, yeah, it's crazy. And it's not
Um,
like, with a still, you can go in and use a masking tool, that kind of thing,
yeah.
if you want, but you got to do it frame by frame because you
Yeah,
can't.
people don't understand that. There's 30 frames in every second or 24 frames in every second of video footage, and that was how many minutes long? So multiply that times, 24 frames. Actually, it was more frames than that because I shot that sequence because I did not know how long it was going to take, the actual event was going to take place, or what I was going to see take place. I wanted to make sure I had enough time. So I intentionally slowed it down a little bit. Not so much that it really looks like a slow motion shot, but just to kind of drag it out a little bit. And I always shoot things a little on the slow side anyway. I just think it takes that digital edge off of things. I think I shot it at like 49 frames a second or 48 frames a second, something like that. So yeah, 48 times you got to sit there and make that change and photo like a Photoshop, like you're fixing a photo. It's the same process, but you got to do it over and over again. That's the reason it's so expensive to do. So it's really got to be something important to make it worth doing that.
And bottom line is if you didn't have the collar, you would have never known where the bear was at. And it's almost impossible to find a bear den
Yeah.
Right.
if you don't have that kind of intel.
Right.
I mean, there's thousands and thousands of cypress trees, right, that could be a potential denning
Yeah.
spot.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's absolutely no human way to figure, well, unless you're lucky and you
Right.
just happen to know, or you just happen to spend your time in this one swamp all the time.
Yeah, but had I happened upon this situation, let's say I was just out shooting one day and I happened upon this, it would have been impossible to film without having previous knowledge of the bear being there to begin with and knowing where I could shoot from. Because the way it turned out, the way when she came out of the tree, and you can see from the footage, and y'all can play that clip, you can actually, I've got an export of just that sequence if you want to use. I think there's actually a Twitter video that they put out of behind the scenes of me actually doing some of the stuff. But anyway, when she came out of the tree, you just don't understand how lucky I was. And it's nothing but luck because when she came out of the tree with the cub, she had 306 other degrees that she could have gone. You know what I'm saying? She could have turned and went away from me. She could have crawled around the backside of the tree and gone down. I wouldn't have seen any of it. She could have turned her back to me and went away from me in any direction. But every time she came down the tree, she turned toward me and paused for a split second, almost like showing me, like, okay, get this good shot of my cub here because I'm getting ready to swim right across in front of you. It was luck, 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 a lot of luck. And, there was just like, again, I told you, there's so many things that went on. There's so many other aspects of the story. And like this thing goes on, and you can cut out a lot of this jibber jabber, but I'll tell you the really insane thing about this. They had ordered me a CN20, a red Gemini, and the Atlas 40 head and the Ronford Baker baby legs. That was going to be the setup. It was.
Hold on. Before you go too much further with all that, you got to explain what all that is because nobody probably knows all those little elements.
Okay.
So a CN20 is what?
is the thing that all cinematographers drool about and dream about all night. It is a lens, a zoom lens that was specifically designed for the natural history world and in cinema. It is 50 millimeters to 1,000 millimeters. It has a built-in 1.5 converter built into the lens, so it's matched to that glass. So you could actually have 75 to 1,500 millimeters. It's parafocal, which means once you set focus at full zoom, you can zoom in and out, and it stays in focus. So it's just everything about it is just a sweet, sweet lens, but it's a very expensive lens. $72,000 just for the lens to be exact. The red Gemini,
and with the servo,
yes,
the servo is electronic too, so it's not like you're twisting a
Right. You don't have to. You can do all. Turn the lens barrels. The zoom and the aperture and the focus, everything manually. But it's got what's called a zoom control, zoom demand. So you can have a thumb. You can control everything with your thumb and stop, start, record with your thumb on the tripod handle as well. And then the Red has several different cameras, but the Gemini is specifically built for low light situations. And obviously swamps are very low light. I had one of those or that was going to be sent in for me to use. The Atlas 40 is simply a very large and very heavy, stable a video pan and fluid head. Tripod head is all it is. But it's very big but it's super stable. You put something on there and it doesn't move. It's just you get real smooth pans and tilts with it. And then the Ronford Baker baby legs are just aluminum, very large tripod legs that are video legs that are made to support big rigs like the CN20. And the CN20 is very large. It's 19 pounds, just the lens. So the Red Gemini setup with monitor and everything's probably another, I'm going to guess 7, 8 pounds. And then the tripod and head by itself is another 20 some pounds. So you have a big rig. That whole rig together, I'm going to guess, would be in $120,000. That was supposed to come in with the crew of 5 from the UK. They had rented it and we're going to have it shipped in to me, and they were all going to meet us there. Well, none of that. The pandemic stopped all that. Stopped it like a freight train. So I had no help and no equipment. The equipment never showed up. FedEx, remember, they shut down, and stuff was coming in by FedEx. And then once FedEx did start resuming some of their deliveries, obviously they had a huge backlog and a huge mess to deal with. So everything was going to be delayed. Long story short, I was using my own personal equipment, which was a Red Dragon, which is, it's a great rig camera, but it's not as sensitive in low light as the Gemini is. So I was at a disadvantage there. And then I did not have a CN20. I had a Sigma, a $2,000 lens, a Sigma 60 to 600 is what I shot that sequence with. A Red Epic Dragon and a Sigma 60 to 600 lens and a Sackler tripod. We did it. We did it with that. The crazy thing about this story is that when the emergence happened at 12:40 on day 42, and when I got to the house at 1:30, 1:35, something like that, I actually saw FedEx driving out the driveway. They had delivered it 15 minutes prior to me pulling up there. It was being delivered while I was shooting the sequence.
Man, I can't imagine it would have looked any better with any different equipment. You killed it.
And that it says a lot. It really says a lot for that equipment, for that lens especially. We all use them now. It's the poor boy's CN20 basically. I use them all the time. And the lens quality is there. I'm gonna tell you, it's there. I eased into Sigma very reluctantly when Tamron too, but Sigma kind of said, we can do this. We can step out from front of the crowd. And they did when they started with the art lenses and stuff, and then the sport lenses. And the 60 to 600 is, I really can't. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles, and it doesn't have the magnification that a CN20 has, but quality wise, it's there, I think.
We still haven't mentioned what show this is actually on, I don't think, did we?
Yeah, we did at the beginning.
The show was America the Beautiful, and it was the second episode. I forgot the name, what the episode name was.
But it's the very first sequence in that second
episode.
It's
the opening sequence in the second episode.
And it's freaking spectacular. Y'all got to watch it.
But watch the whole thing because there's stories like this throughout the whole series. But Jason, you had something just a minute ago.
Yeah, just a couple things real quick. First of all, I didn't know, honestly, at the time that was your sequence, Doug. Mm-hmm. And I was just blown away. I showed multiple people It's like,
Oh,
check this
cool.
out. Look at how this bear's carrying their cubs. It's just, yeah, it's just insane. But anyways,
Okay.
and then I found out later, obviously, as I was talking to Mike and Ron. But and then I have a question. You kind of blew over one thing that I'm really curious about because you're 6'2", Water's 6 foot,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm assuming that was the case from the levee to the tree as
Yeah,
well.
well, it tapered up. It would get, it would go from the deepest place, which was where the blind was, the water got about 6 feet deep. And I'm working within 23 yards of the den. And so that tree was about 6 feet of water too at the base of it. It depends. If you'll see, there was a lot of cypress knees just under the surface of the water. And if you see her step down in the water, one time she steps down in the water and she has to actually swim because it's too deep for her. But then the next time you see her, it actually looks like she's standing up, and she is. She's actually standing straight up on her back legs, and she's got the cub hanging out of her mouth, and she's basically walking on top of cypress knees until she gets to the point where her feet will actually touch the ground, because it was just solid. I've been in there now. I'm actually shot an assignment in that exact same location. I mean, right in front of that tree this year for another production on alligators. And now that it was bone dry in there, and I know now exactly what she was stepping on. It was just a bed of cypress knees.
Tell us what a cypress knee is, because I don't think anybody that's not been to the swamp would know.
So bald cypress trees, being that they live in water, I mean they actually grow in water. Their root system can be very weak, and so their roots actually will go down in the ground and then go out just under the surface of the ground. And the ends they have these little ends on their roots that will go up, that will come up out of the ground and out of the water in some cases. There's a lot of ideas on what the purpose of a cypress knee actually is. Some scientists actually say that's a way for the tree to breathe, and then some say that what it does is slows the water movement around the tree. With all the knees sticking up, the water movement slows down, which allows sediment to fall and settle around the roots, which actually gives it more of a base to hold on to keep the tree upright. Which, to me, I think that is probably the more justified explanation.
Did you have any cypress knees around your blind where you could actually use them to step up onto your platforms?
No, I did not. I did not actually. Well, I had some, but they weren't close enough that I could actually step onto, or they weren't tall enough to do me any good. I mean, you're constantly tripping over them when you're walking in. But I mean, you'll have some that are 3 inches tall, and you may have some that are 3 feet tall.
That's amazing.
It was just, it was crazy. It was, yeah, it was just a crazy, crazy, ordeal from start to finish. Everything about it.
Well, and like you said, it's the most difficult shoot you've ever done, but it's also the most rewarding, which is a constant theme, right? You hear that all the
Yeah.
time. And now
Oh yeah.
you're like the only person in the world that's ever shot that, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. So the crazy thing about it, so you remember I told you that as soon as you shoot something, then other producers quickly see it and they're like, oh yeah, I want to do that too, but I want to do it a little bit different. I guess it was a few months, 2 months after I got home off the shoot. So I get a phone call from another producer, and they say, I'm such and such with such and such, and tell me about these swamp bears. And of course, I'm NDA'd up. I can't talk about it. But no, no one knew about this. No one. I mean, they had it under lock and key, and I certainly had not talked to anybody about it. I hadn't been around anybody, and I'm like, they caught me so off guard. I did not. I was just tripping over my words. I didn't know what to say. I was like, you know, and I said, I don't know if I can talk about it. And they said, oh, yeah, we understand. And then they continue to ask me more questions about it. And I said, listen, here, this is the producer. You talk to her or him. And if they say I can talk about it, I can talk about it. But anyway, they called me and they got permission to talk to, for me to talk to them about it. And they said, we want you to shoot the same thing again, but we got a different angle on the whole deal. And I'm like, well, first of all, big if I agreed to do this again, I said, I don't think y'all realize what I've been through. And it's still fresh on my mind. Matter of fact, 18 trips to the chiropractor to get my back fixed. So just sitting in that chair. Yeah. We got it all worked out, and I actually shot the same behavior again, a different tree, different bear, probably 50 miles south of that location. I did it again the very next year. And that one ended up being about 30 days, 31 days. But we actually had a second camera operator. I had much better blinds, very hard-sided, hard-sided blinds that nothing could get to me. So, yeah, I mean, it had its challenges too, and we can talk about that later after that one airs, because it had its own problems. Only person that's done it and done it twice. So.
And the blinds that he had built were pretty cool. We'll have to put some pictures up in the show notes.
I just don't know if people have an appreciation for what it takes to sit in a blind for 8 hours, let alone 14.
Yeah, it's
and
hard.
not be able to stand up and being in the water and having the snakes. I mean, that is insane. That is incredible. That I'm not sure I'd want to do it for any amount of money, to be quite honest with you.
I don't have to tell you how many times it went through my brain, like, okay, screw this, screw it, I'm done. I mean, but I've never quit anything in my life, and I wasn't about to try, and the bottom line is I knew there was cubs in that tree, and they had to come out at some point. That's the only thing that kept me going. This is going to happen. How well it turns out is a whole different story, but this is going to happen. It's just a matter of me being here. And so, like I said, having that producer that, she would chat with me for hours, just texting, which helped, me mentally. Lots of friends, and, Ron and Mike would, text me and, what's going on and that kind of stuff. See what people do on Facebook, because I had cell signals, so that helped a lot.
Let alone not knowing if it happened at night. I mean, you could have sat there the whole time, and it could have been a nighttime thing, and then you learn. But
yeah, and that does happen. I learned from experience the next year that does happen. So that was actually one of the things I would think about was, did she move them tonight? Don't know if I'm going to sit and watch an empty hole all day tomorrow. So
nobody knew how this was going to go down, right? But when Maria tells you show up a week early, when you get that information, your thought process is probably like, okay, well, if I'm here a week early, then I've got that safety net, but this is only going to be 10, 15 days. And then 10, 15 days, you're into it. And yeah, you're committed. You don't want to leave. You've already spent this much time. So I just can't imagine if you knew it was going to be 42 days when it was 15 days, you might have been like, yeah, I'm not doing this. But to stick it out for 4, and then for every day that you spend in there, it's got to be like, okay, you're just getting more invested, right? So for sure, you're not going to leave. That thing could have been 100 days and you'd have stayed. Well, the other thing I would say too, and as with your story is, with these BBC or UK producers, these production company people, it's a blessing and a curse sometimes to have them along, right? Because sometimes they're just doing their job and they want to be helpful, but a lot of times it can kind of be a pest because you're trying to get your thing done and they're like tapping you on the shoulder. Hey, did you see this over here? Or did you get that over there? And so the blessing is you didn't have to put up with any of that. But the curse on this one is it sounds like you could have used some help for the DIT or the downloading of all the stuff every night, making sure batteries are charged, giving you a little bit of like a relief to have somebody sit in there for an hour or whatever, just so you could stretch your legs. There was none of that. So the curse was, you would have been way more. It would have been way better if they would have been with you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it would just been able to relieve me somewhat. I mean, like I said, you don't realize how just having a little bit of communication, 5 minutes of being able to talk with another human, just a way to kind of decompress and talk about the day and, whatever, or give me that extra 15 to 20 minutes of sleep. It added up for sure. Yeah, it was nuts. One of the things I'll tell you real quick that went through my brain constantly was I was always replaying. Well, I was always thinking about how it was going to go down when it did go down. So I'm thinking about, okay, it's just me. It's just me, one camera. And you got to think about, I'm not just shooting this one behavior. I have got to get enough footage to build a sequence by myself in one shot. So I'm thinking about the wides, I'm thinking about the mids, I'm thinking about the tights, I'm thinking about the detail shots, but I don't know how this behavior is going to go down. So I can't say, okay, well, I need to get her swimming across with this, cub first, and then I need to get the second go round, need to get, a tighter shot, and then I need to go for the wide shot. So I had to kind of come up with a plan of exactly how I was going to do that. I actually put a Canon, what did I shoot it with? A DSLR, 1DX. Yeah. 1DX Mark.
Yeah, Mark II or Mark III or whatever it was,
Mark
the last
III.
one.
Mark II. Yeah, 1DX Mark II. Yeah, the last one. I had that set up with a 20 mil lens and 24 millimeter lens, and I had that locked off, and that was pointing. That was right beside the red, and so I had that set up, locked off, and that was always going to be my wide shot. So I just knew when this started happening, all I had to do is reach over there, hit record, and then I forget about it. Pre-focus it on the tree, make sure I have a little bit of depth of field. Forget about it. I got the wide shot. Then all I had to do is concentrate on getting the tight, the detail, and then the mid shot, and then that took off a fourth of the problem right there by having the lock off shot already. So, but it played through my mind, and then don't forget to hit record. Don't forget to hit record. I mean, I would actually stick little pieces of tape all over my monitor so that I would have to remove the piece of tape. I would have to physically remove it to be able to see to shoot, and that reminded me to hit record. I mean, because it sounds stupid, sounds silly, but when you're that tired and your brain is that gone, I could have easily done it. I mean, I've forgotten to hit record when I was fully functional. That doesn't happen much anymore. I mean, that was kind of a rookie thing, but it's definitely, anybody that says they hadn't done it, they're lying. But yeah, those little mistakes is what I was so scared of making, was the small mistakes, which could have screwed it all up.
Oh, it's happened to me not hitting record. I've done it a couple of times, and you get so excited because what you're about ready to shoot, you're like, you hit the double press, or I don't know, just something stupid happens. And I could see that being the good thing, I think, for you, bad for the bear, was that lightning storm, because if she went back and forth so many times, that probably gave you more opportunities.
It gave me more opportunities, right? Yeah, so it was tough, and I was having, there was no autofocus, so I was having to follow focus all this, and I knew I had one shot at this, so I had to treat every moment like I'm not getting a second chance. Even though I did get a second chance, I had to treat every moment like this is it. You got to nail it. So you're trying to be smooth, you're trying to pan at just the right speed, you're trying to nail focus the whole time, because like I said, it's such a short window. All of it's got to be in focus. I can't screw up. So there was a lot weighing on my shoulders.
Thank God for peaking.
Yes, thank God for
Yeah,
peaking.
no doubt.
Yeah, because it damn sure wasn't depth of field that saved my butt. I can promise you that, because it was dark, buddy. It was dark. I was shooting wide open. I was shooting at 5.6.
Right, because that's all that lens will go to. You're paying $72,000 for a lens, but the opening is 5.6 at the widest.
Well, I didn't shoot it with the CN20.
Well, he wasn't shooting with that
No,
lens.
I was shooting.
That's
60
true.
to 60
No, it was-
to
But
600.
even with the 60 to 600,
Yeah,
That's as wide as it'll go.
Yeah.
it's 5.6, right?
5.6.
Yep.
Yeah, 5.6 and 6.3. So if you're on the 600,
Well, I'll tell you what, Sigma needs to At 600, it's what? 6 point something?
At 600, 6.3.
6'3", I think.
Yep.
6'3".
I think Sigma needs to send you a whole crate of those
I think
lenses.
so too. I think so too.
Have you talked to Sigma? Do they understand that you actually shot that whole sequence with that
Not
lens?
yet. Not yet. Maybe you need to drop them an email. It'd be kind of weird for me to mention it to them. Maybe you should drop them an email.
Yeah, no, I will definitely.
Red definitely wants the story. They've already contacted me.
Oh, I bet.
Red used to do a whole like YouTube series or something about different filmmakers.
Well, they've got a whole new thing
and
going.
This would be awesome.
They've got a whole new platform now, and it's it used to be called Shot on Red, but now I think might be the one you were talking about, Shot on Red. But then the new thing is it's all about the behind the scenes stories and stuff of different projects and everything, and they've already reached out to me, and I'm going to put something together. I was giving my boys at Wild and Exposed first shot at it though.
I appreciate it. It's not often that if I think about the times in my past where I've waited 2 years to have a conversation, I think I've forgotten about most of them before that conversation ever took place. But this one, I wasn't going to let it go. So when I knew you were up there shooting with Mike, I was like, okay, you got to set this up. We got to talk.
Yeah, not a problem. I'm glad we got it.
I don't know how you did it with the whole blind thing and not falling asleep, because I will tell you, I've done a lot of shoots with Doug, and he is the king of the mid-afternoon nap, right? Because we get up early and we go shoot for that early light, get a lot of activity. That's just the best time to shoot. Then you get the midday, like bad light, just hot, especially if you're in the swamps. It's just hot. It's perfect time to go back and take an hour-long little siesta, and then you go back out in the evening, and Doug can, we'll show back up wherever we're staying. He'll eat something and he is gone, and then he wakes up all chipper, like ready to like skip to the next location, ready to go. I just can't imagine you doing this without your midday nap, your hour-long little siesta for 42 days. It's crazy. I don't know if I could have done it, because that falling asleep, that just, it's like sitting in class when you were in school after lunch.
It's the little things that you started to appreciate. So like I would actually schedule my snack time and my lunch time. And you would schedule it. So like I would like, okay, at 9:30, I can eat, my first pack of Cheez-Its. And then at, 11:45, I get to start eating my ham sandwich. And you would like, it gave you things, little goals to achieve. It's like 15 more minutes, I get to wear that sandwich out. I mean, it's the little things. It's the only way you can get through the day. Yeah. Yeah.
I think you might be able to work a sponsorship from Cheez-Its also.
Yeah.
Cheez-Its and Sigma. Doug Gardner, brought to you by
That's
Cheez-Its and Sigma.
And Sigma. Oh, man.
And I will tell you, he doesn't show up on a shoot without his Cheez-Its.
Nope.
They're everywhere.
Nope.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Doug, I can't thank you enough for taking the time,
man.
and again for letting us have this conversation. I'm excited for you. That when I saw it, it was everything I imagined it was going to be, and then some. To be honest with you,
appreciate it.
So,
yeah, I don't have the Disney whatever. I don't know if it's on Apple TV or whatever. I just don't have that subscription. But I was at a buddy's who did, and I was like, "We're watching this," because I knew it was that episode, and I was blown away. I just, you get chills. You just know what you went through, and then you get to see the footage, and I'm not kidding. You just get chills watching it. It's so cool.
Yeah, after hearing the story, it gives the whole footage a whole new level of color and respect for sure, man. Congratulations, buddy.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to go watch it again right now.
Yeah, I'm too, actually.
Cool.
So what's next, Doug? What's next on your agenda?
Well, actually, I am going next week to start a waterfowl project for the Atlantic Flyway. and I'm actually starting South Carolina down on our coast of Georgetown. Start filming, new early arrivals on for the winter migration, and then I'm going to drop down to Georgia and going to grab some footage down there, and then I'm going to be all the way up the near the North Atlantic, working on ducks, geese, and swans up there as well. So just trying to capture as much waterfowl on the Atlantic flyway as possible.
And you do workshops up there too, right?
Yeah, I
For
do.
waterfowl?
I'm actually going to, while I'm up there shooting this time, I'm actually going to do my workshops during that time. I have a break, and so I'm going to do my workshops during my break. So instead of coming back home.
So if anybody's interested, you can just go to Doug's website, or you can send us an email or send us a DM on Instagram or whatever. But if you want to do some really cool waterfowl stuff, Doug's the person to go with. He's a certified waterfowl nut, like I said earlier. It's kind of annoying sometimes because you're trying to get to a place and he sees a duck and you got to stop.
Oh, things were going to get real when Mike and I were in. We were up in northern Montana working on this conservation project, and things were getting ready to get real because Steven came in one night and said there was 2 trumpeter swans on one of these little ponds on this property, and I was like, "Wait a minute, hold on, what'd you say?" And we've been out filming bears and elk and all kinds of crazy stuff, moose, and nobody said anything about waterfowl. And so that was things were getting ready to change for me. I was like, y'all gonna do bears today? I'm going to do swans. So, but no, there were swans up there. But yeah, Mike and I both got to go back in January and finish working on that project, which is I'm actually really excited about that project, Mike, because we already know that it's supposed to open this door to a much bigger platform of 32 other conservation films. This is supposed to be kind of the first of, which is a pretty big deal. So, I mean, that's years of work for both of us. So.
We'll be walking around with canes.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm going to scan that ticket and maybe we'll get that gimbal you guys have been wanting to get, and then Ron will jump in on that too.
Hey, come on, man. Come on.
Jason can't because he was being negative Nelly earlier.
That's right.
Doesn't
That's
think
right.
I'm
You're
gonna,
out of the wheel.
Doesn't think I'm gonna win it.
I've learned my lesson.
And by ticket, he means lottery ticket.
Yeah. The odds are ever in my favor. So
if anybody's going to win out of all of us, it's going to be you.
Well, I'm the only one that buys a stupid ticket.
Well, that's part of it.
And then the other thing about Doug that we kind of glossed over it a couple times, but he will be in Wyoming, does a great video workshop in northern Wyoming also. So if you're into the video, you're not going to have a better wildlife and scenery opportunities than the workshop he's got. And we'll put a link to Doug's workshops in the show notes, and so
Sounds
we can
good.
point you right
But
to
you
him.
need to get on your mailing list too, right, Doug? Because you send out a list. If you have a spot opening or something, you'll send it out to the email. So
Yeah.
if y'all just want to get on Doug's
it's
list,
better just to
send
get
me.
on the list because usually they sell out in a few hours from the time I send the emails out to everybody. So it's better just to get on the mailing list. That way you have a shot at getting in.
And what is the website? Which
It's
one
DougGardner.com.
should they go to?
DougGardner.com.
And then what is the YouTube?
The Natural History Channel.
And then what's your Instagram handle?
I have no idea. I think it's I love Jesus. I don't know. No, I think it's
I love Jesus.
I think it's
Is it Doug Gardner Wildlife?
I think it's Doug Gardner
It's
Wildlife.
Doug Gardner Wildlife.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
All right. So you obviously don't check that account too much.
Well, I look at it, but I never look at the name.
Oh,
on it.
your handle.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So you can get to Doug if you are dying to go on a trip. Send a DM there. But best thing to do is just get him your email.
Yeah.
Do you have like a sign up sheet or something on your website?
You can sign up on the website. Yeah. I'm actually redoing, getting ready to launch a new website to just kind of a revamp the old one. It's just because it's easier for me to change it and update it on the road. It's one of those things, websites, if you don't do it a lot, you kind of forget exactly how to go in and manipulate it and all that kind of stuff. And then it takes you forever because you got to kind of relearn, how it's put together. So, I actually switched over to Squarespace, and I rebuilt my whole website in about 4 or 5 hours.
Don't say that. I don't
That's
even
what I
know
keep
that
telling
right now.
Ron.
Yeah.
I just get a Squarespace site and you can have it going.
Yeah, I'm in SmugMug right now, and it's been great. I mean, their image, their quality, the platforms, everything is great. I mean, no problems whatsoever. Never had a website problem with them, and so no problem fault of theirs. It's a bit complicated. If you don't make changes a lot, you forget like how to do it, and you have to kind of go back and relearn it, and it's not exactly, I wouldn't call it user friendly. So you got to kind of study it on what does what. It's not intuitive, I guess is the word. So, but Squarespace, I literally got on there and I think I watched one little 5-minute video and on YouTube, and I was off and running with it. So
yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking at, and I'm with SmugMug also. It is great because you can kind of set it and forget it and let people do what they want to do with your, as far as buying your images. But
and you can do all that same stuff with Squarespace.
yeah, speaking of, this will be out before Christmas. If any of you need an idea for a kid's book, I do have. Let me tell you about my mom. It's the first in a series of 4 books that'll be coming out over the next few years. So send me an email, hit me up.
Awesome.
Check out the link on the website.
When you come to Cody, bring one.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I'll get it for you.
It's an awesome book. Everybody needs to go check it out. If you got a kid in your life, what would you say the age? I mean, I loved it. I would buy one for me, but what is the perfect age?
Honestly, my grandson's, he's 6 months old, but he looks at the pictures, and so you can go basically from 1 to 14. There's facts in there that every adult that I've had read the book, there are things in there that they didn't know about specific species that are represented. So it's 1 to 14, you're going to learn something for sure. But it's probably 4 to 12 is probably the target audience.
So what we're going to do is you can find that book until Ron gets his new Squarespace site up and running. You can find that book on the Wild and Exposed site. So you can just go purchase that book, and then Ron will fulfill it from Wyoming.
Well, thanks again, Doug. Thanks, Jason and Mike. And thank you all for listening to another great episode of Wild and Exposed Podcast.
You've been listening to the Wild and Exposed podcast. If you haven't yet, please give us a rating and a review. And make sure you're subscribed so that you'll get every episode we produce as soon as we drop it. And as always, thanks for tuning in.
We're gonna make it someday. Nothing's gonna get in our way. We will be the biggest band in town.